chance to review the prior meeting minutes from June 22nd? That's right. Wow, a long time ago.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Report of the CEO, Brian Ingram.
Let's see. We did not retain Don Briggs after his probationary period, who was our HR director. So we're in the process of shifting things around a little bit to have coverage for that, and then figure out how to go forward. Of course, we're also still recruiting for the CFO position, and then, so I haven't really updated folks on that. We had a pretty unusual situation. We had a guy, I think about 98% of the way there, and then at the last second, just pulled away. So we're back, up with that, and Jennifer's been helping. We had 2 Skype interviews this week. I think I have 2 or 3 more scheduled for next week. We're being pretty aggressive about that. It's possible that we could put HR under that position. We haven't said that to anyone yet, so just considering that. Legislative and DHHS updates. Well, they found out that there was a mistake in the budget bill around the way they calculated the single stream reductions. It was really what amounts to a math error. A math error. And this is, you're going to think I'm exaggerating or not telling this story right, but this is a good example of the work that we do with our business partner in the state. Now, it was unusual this year that they made specific amounts that were part of the recurring and non-recurring reductions. And I think we actually showed that page out of the budget bill. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Now, mind you, there was an explanation conceptually for how they calculated the reductions, but no one ever shared the actual methodology. So we were on a call with, I guess, the director, state director, MHDD, SU, whatever you want to call it, state director. And he explained how partners had informed them that there was perhaps a mistake in their calculation. And I asked that question, I said, well, how would anyone know if there was a mistake or if it was calculated accurately? To which, I'm not sure he gave a response, but essentially that we wouldn't be able to know because no one had shared the methodology. And the only reason that partners raised a question about it being inaccurate was because they had seen different iterations of the budget bill, and at the 11th hour, there was a big change in theirs. So they just asked about it, and it was determined that yes, in fact, there was a mistake. They were charged, their reduction was too large, so by changing theirs, they had to change everybody else's, rather than just go find the money and fix it that way. So we have an additional reduction of $400,000. The governor, in the bill that they ran to make that correction, the governor vetoed it, and I have not heard that the General Assembly has overridden it yet. They may have to wait until they come back again to do that. So there's that.
And what was the original difference before that $400,000?
Pull this
And
out.
Brian, you can also tell them that they changed the way they've done that several times before that came about.
This is actually works more in our favor. calculated it to in some manner, having to do with your available cash and the amount of reinvestment funding, either that you would use or booked or budgeted or something, so. Anyway, our cut is, about 7.5 million each year. And of course, we've been through all of this in relationship to our budget and what a problem that creates for us and the other impingements, I guess we could say, on our fund balance, such that we have to really change how we're going about some things. So we, as a result, will have budget amendment in finance committee today to address that. And I'm sure that won't be the last one. So we have that, and then we had also the release of the Secretary's managed care plan, and that's in everybody's packet too, correct, Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a pretty extensive document. We've created a draft of a timeline to try to get people oriented to what it was that how it would look. I just find that, we've had a lot of success with the shortcut to do full screen when you have a PDF. I'm not even sure. Oh no. Anyway, I think you have that in your handout also. I know, it's,
Jay, if you printed it out before it's in the packet up here, you probably don't have it here.
Is this what you look for?
Binder. No,
that was the one I was talking about earlier, the runway there.
That's
We
correct.
can make it a copy, we don't have one.
That was added in. They're in the packet, yes. It should
Yeah.
be in your packet.
Yeah, I've got the runway, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I was looking for the budget last year, I was looking for, if we passed it, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
We're on something else,
Yeah. And I can just take you through this real fast, and then whatever questions you want to have about it. I'm not sure how this is feasible. You see there's a whole bunch of things that are supposed to happen this fall. We started off with the release of her white paper, and they're kind of going with the seasonal approach here. Early fall, a concept paper that DHHS would submit to CMS, an RFI, and it was not clear in the document whether or not the RFI would be for we're gonna have to learn some new language. There's standard plans and then there's tailored plans. And the standard plans would be the basic health plans that did not include the high need population. We've talked about it as specialty plans, special needs plans. Our understanding at least is that if we were after a tailored plan, which again has always been our approach, would be to develop the expertise to be able to operate in that manner. And the RFI apparently would not apply to us or anyone else applying for that in the fall of this year. And then the actual RFP responses to the RFP, where do we go here? For both the tailored plans, and again, when you think of tailored plan, think of specialty plan, like we had talked about before, what we're interested in pursuing, where we would have a small population of individuals and have the responsibility for all of the Medicaid expenditures, physical health, and specialty. Have a different catchment area, whole different capitation, a lot of things different. The RFP for that would be in June of next year. And you would either make it or not, and you'd find out the contracts for that would be awarded by February 1st, and contracts executed by March 1st, 2019. So if you were lucky enough to secure one of those awards, you would be driving towards going live in July of 2021. If you were not successful, you would be going away. And I don't really understand how you would be able to manage an organization like this. Let's say if we were unsuccessful, we'd have to continue operation. It would be known first part of 2019, for 2 years, you'd have to run an organization that had no future and was going to go out of business.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
So,
Brian, Ronnie's having a hard time finding the runway in the packet.
Oh, I found it. Very last page.
Very last thing.
Yeah, I got it.
yeah, this, probably just stop there. We're at a meeting with the secretary in a couple of weeks to try to reckon with all of this. Phil?
What do you reckon? I mean, how do you,
Well, just the amount of legislation that they would have to tackle would be really substantial. And as recent as, I guess, yesterday or the day before, Josh Dobson, who is kind of a rising star in the House, one of our guys too, good man, spoke at a big provider meeting, and I don't know that he said anything that anybody didn't already probably expect or understand. The House and the Senate are not very close on any of this, especially the stuff that relates to LME MCO. That's probably where they're furthest apart. And there had been no movement whatsoever on 403, which was the bill that had accumulated all kinds of things by the end of the session. Everything from the, let's give it to Cardinal and Richard to managed care stuff. And there was theory that when they came back in the special called session here in the fall that they'd take it up, but no interest whatsoever in that. So, all you can do is kind of, I guess, understand that this is the state's plan, and whether or not it's doable or not remains to be seen. But there would be enormous obstacles and political challenges associated with that. So I just stop there. I mean, there's a lot in all of this to understand and address. But none of it's a short, easy conversation. We're on it. I guess or to say one, thing to help people, kind of frame all of this in relationship to us. I don't think anybody's in any better shape than we are in relationship to this, put it that way. Now, I'm not offering any guarantees, but other than to say that we continue to do all the things that we have talked about and would be as helpful as possible to finding our way in this. Finding our way in this and having value in this new healthcare marketplace, which is ultimately, we've just stuck with that, and that's where we're going to keep going.
Brian, have you really seen them any of the work they've done on the waiver, or have they done anything with the waiver? When I looked at a little bit of that, and I don't know who's doing that.
They have consultants.
Have you saw it?
I have not.
There's 2 or 3 paragraphs out of it, just, I mean, when they say amend, they don't amend to it. It's changed, it's just, and the waivers, everything hinges on the waiver.
Sure does. I mean, there's a lot of things that all this hinges on. CMS approving the waiver, and then DHHS having the authority to do the things they need to do in relationship to the waiver. So I just, those are just 2 enormous factors in all of this that are, they're just unknowns.
But they might be good change, I don't know what I was reading, it's above my pay grade. I mean, I don't know what, I know that there's, but we've always thought that should be some good changes to the waiver. They need to be some changes to the waiver. But what, with the language, some lawyer must put, I don't know. But
A couple of lawyers.
you can't read it. I mean, I could, you probably, Brian, you could, or Tracy could, or Jay, somebody could. You just, you can tell that it, compare that to the current waiver. It's all about the money. Don't lose sight of what it's all about.
Well, in light of what they've done to us with the budget, I mean, who's gonna be left?
Oh, yeah, you were sure, but I don't know.
What would happen if CMS just said, no, we're not going to approve that?
They wouldn't be able to do, well, okay, let me, I suppose they could try to get an amendment to the existing 1915 BC waiver and see what could be accomplished with that. And I am not a technical waiver expert, and somebody like Tara could kind of walk us through what would be doable through an amendment to that waiver.
I don't believe that they would give comments back as to what would cause it to be not that they would fix for the 1115.
Well, I'm just presuming they, that it just wasn't gonna be, I'm just trying to, be very literal with your question. What would be the other avenues? I mean, they couldn't go forward with the plan as it is proposed. And they'd have to look for an alternative way to make changes. And they do have an existing approved waiver, so another way to deal with things is to make amendments to that existing waiver. I just don't know how extensively an amendment could be made to accomplish any of what they want to. That's the best answer I can give you.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is because I'm just thinking about a way to fight the situation, and one way would be, it seems like to me, is that the waiver just would not be approved. What would the legislature then do? How long would it take them to do it? Or would they do what was it, Baker in there said, just turn the light switch and go for profit? I mean,
Yeah,
because
I
that
don't-
would be a level that you could maybe get to. I don't know who those people are. I assume they're in Washington DC, but, I mean, they are people who make decisions, and if we knew who they were, and they agreed that North Carolina was running the railroad car off the track, maybe we could get some help from them. Is that even a logical thing to even think about?
Number one, you gotta remember, the secretary is the past chief operating officer from CMS. So, you like to believe that she has something, obviously in a previous administration, but, knows her way around Washington enough to get things done. So I just don't know, Jay. you know, they have to do something on the physical health side. You know, I think that ship has sailed. You know, they're gonna have to do something to get out of, you know, being at risk over Medicaid in a fee-for-service environment. They need to have a capitated way to address Medicaid for physical health. I mean, all states are, you know, have some way of dealing with that, or are approaching a solution to that. So what would be doable without the 1115 waiver? You know, Tara would have to do an in-service for us on that.
But are they using a template from somewhere else to,
They seem to like Arizona,
yeah?
which has a specialty plan. There's a component in the Arizona plan.
They tend to like, who is they?
Secretary has made comments about
Secretary.
Arizona.
Which is, of course, the administration as opposed to the legislative.
Correct. Correct. You know, and by and large, you know, the Senate favors a more, you know, sort of privatized commercial handover versus the House, which is more inclined towards, you know, the public kind of stuff that we're doing. That's what
But I think that's a very aggressive schedule.
Well said.
I don't see that that's going to,
Possibly. That plane's not flying on that schedule right now.
no.
So now be careful, because that, do you remember that plane, do you see the logo on that plane?
Oh, yeah, I see it.
So we gotta
That plane's got.
get the plane off the runway no matter what, okay?
No matter who.
That's right. Get her done.
Gotta have good faith in you. That's at least any part that's within your control.
Yeah. No pressure. Any other comments? Are we ready for the next item on the agenda? Closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we go into closed sessions pursuant to North Carolina Junior Statute 143-318 in order to prevent the disclosure of competitive health information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina Junior Statute 122C, 122.1, are not considered public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, and to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina Statute 143.381.1.
Could you say it one more time?
You sound like
second
tobacco.
that.
Did somebody say second?
Okay, he seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Had to try to get you, he didn't get here till 2:15, so that's what happened.
Okay, well, I was glad to sit in on the last part of it too, so. I guess we're ready to get going.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Billy Kennedy. I'm the chair of this Regulatory Compliance and Quality Committee meeting. I guess real quick, we'll go around and do introductions, starting with Lon.
Hi, Yvonne French, DMH Liaison.
Marvin Sanders, I'm the Risk and Regulatory Affairs Director at VIA.
I'm Steve Puckett, Member Appeals Director.
Andrea Hartman, Regulatory Compliance Manager.
Patty Wilson, Senior Director of Quality, Performance and Quality Improvement. It's a new title, I'm still learning.
I know, I'm trying to do
Jesse Smathers, Specialty Populations Clinical Director.
Pam Holcomb, board member.
Tracy Hayes, General Counsel.
Well, good. Well, thank you all for being here. We'll try to move this pretty quickly since we got a little delayed by the executive committee running over a little bit. I need an approval of the agenda first, and I get a,
So moved.
and can I get a second, Pat?
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. And approval of the June minutes.
So moved.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank y'all. All right, well, let's get started. I guess, Tracy, you're up first.
All right, I'm going to be really quick on our regulatory compliance update. I don't have a lot of things to share. In terms of our DHHS contracts, we are negotiating with the Division of State Operated Healthcare Facilities, and a meeting has been scheduled for, I believe, the 12th of September in Raleigh. At some point in September in Raleigh, I'll be going to Raleigh to negotiate the the DSOF contract. A big piece of that will be around the ADATCs and the change in the funding patterns for the ADATCs. That's probably the biggest contract we have right now with DHHS that we're working on, as well as a subsidy administration contract.
Subsidy administration?
This is part of the TCLI program.
Okay,
And
okay.
this is managing those housing contracts. Housing, Marvin, you explained it, you're so much better at this.
Managing the funding for rental assistance.
Okay, and then I heard that y'all were trying to find perhaps a block of housing and stuff to do, looking at different housing alternatives, because we're having a hard time finding people for the place for the TCLI.
We've asked, put in a request to be able to do master leasing with DHHS, is that correct?
That's correct.
So
Thanks.
that's it for me.
Anything else?
Yes, sir.
Well, I guess Jesse, you're next.
Okay. In your package, you should have a Via Health letterhead that says NC Innovations Quarterly Dashboard.
Zero?
And I bought this before last night, so I don't know
Okay.
where it is.
That one didn't come to me.
Oh, you printed it out, this is what you printed out, this, yes, because it didn't make it into the mailing.
Okay.
No, I've got a hard copy here, but
It's
it's,
just a one-page document.
It's just a one-page document.
We're not sneaking in something super long.
Back here.
okay.
And,
It's hard to read during the meeting.
what it is just a summary of what NC Innovations is.
Okay.
North Carolina Innovations is a
Thank you for
1915
calling the ConX Meet Now
home and
Please enter your
community-based services
passcode
waiver
followed by the pound or
of
hash
the
key.
Social Security Act rules that allows us to provide services to members in the community that would otherwise be provided in an institution, specifically in intermediate care facility for
Please
people with
hold while I
intellectual
confirm
disabilities.
your passcode.
And it is a
Thank you.
slot-based
Your
program.
passcode is confirmed. If you are the host of this meeting, press the star key now, or you will hear music.
You can't turn that down, I guess, while you're doing
Well, I'll
that.
let you finish.
Yeah, that's as low as it goes.
It is like the third or fourth page in your packet.
You got the little pie chart in it?
Yep,
Yes.
it's got the little pie chart in it.
2,
You are welcome to have mine,
It's
sir.
not a code I can
Okay. And it's a slot-based program. Via Health has allocated 1,677 slots. Or that's what we allocated for last waiver year. Each slot, I'm just gonna stop for a minute. Feels like I'm being heckled.
Yeah, this old
Are you
brain.
connected? Okay. So it's done. So by slot-based program, we're given a set number of people that we can serve. And for each slot, we receive a specific amount of money that's less than the amount of money that someone can receive services comparable to. So we have those 1,677 slots. 1,644 of the slots are allocated for routine or non-reserved categories, which means those are our active slots. And those are the slots that we can fill at the beginning of each waiver year, which starts August 1. As of June 30, we had several terminated slots, and it looked as though we would be able to fill 11 slots starting July 1. I'm sorry, August 1, which we're in the process of doing. We also have reserved capacity slots with the waiver. That's the chart in the center, because these are the only slots that we really have any control over who receives. The reserved capacity slots are there for people that are aging out of the Community Alternatives Program for children, the CAP-C program. If they are eligible for for innovations, when they age out, we can move them into innovations. We have 2 slots held aside for that. We also reserve 10 slots for Money Follows the Person. That's an initiative by the Division of Medical Assistance to move people straight out of institutions into community living arrangements. And then we have 10 slots, or 11 slots set aside for emergency needs. Those are the slots that we allocate to individuals that meet specific criteria. The criteria is fairly rigid. They have to be at risk of homelessness. They have to be in a circumstance where there's no other service delivery system that can meet their needs. And they have to be at risk of going into custody of DSS, those kind of issues. Pretty severe needs before we can allocate an emergent slot. As of June 30th, we had allocated 22 of our reserved slots. We had one left unassigned, and it was assigned in July. With regard to other IDD services, we have 1,318 people on the IDD wait list. And many of those people are receiving some form of services, but a lot are not. 1,305 have been determined potentially eligible for innovations, which means when they come up on the list, we can offer them a routine or non-reserved slot if one's available. We have 54 people waiting for state-funded IDD services. These are typically services delivered in group homes. Sometimes they're smaller AFLs or alternative family living arrangements. Out of the people on our wait list, 220 are receiving B3 Medicaid respite, which that's a great thing we're able to offer through managed care. And we have 410 that are receiving other state-funded services. These include services such as adult day vocational placement, other group living options, some personal assistance, or individual habilitation, as we call it in the community. And all total, about a third of the folks on our wait list, 479, are receiving some form of services through state funds or B3. That's really the summary of innovations. The total budget for innovations, the average cost per person is around $63,000 for innovations, which is significantly less than what we pay annually for intermediate care facility placements or placements at J. Iverson Road.
So this total number is set by the state?
Yes.
And what are the main factors holding us back from filling these other seats, these other slots?
The 11 non-reserve slots that we hadn't filled as of June 30th, the way the program works is if a person's in a slot on August 1, which is the start of the waiver year, and they leave the state on August 2, we cannot fill that slot with another person until August 1 of the following year. It sits vacant. But our processes are such that all these 11 that we've identified, only 3 are not active yet. And they're in process because of evaluation pieces and levels of care that have to occur.
But I guess this 1,305 people for NC Innovations, is it a funding issue?
It's a funding issue.
But the state sets the number, so we can't just fix the number and say we need more slots.
No.
The state has to do that.
Right. The
So
number
okay.
is set by the state legislature. And in legislation this summer, they added 400 slots statewide, which if everything's as it usually is, we will get 10 to 11% of that. So 40 to 44 slots, probably January 1. I've been told that they're submitting an amendment to add the slots in December. So that would allow us to take 44 people off of our registry of unmet needs.
And these affect our metrics. Some of our rating metrics are based on these numbers too.
I'm not certain about
Okay.
how that it impacts our numbers.
Okay. I'm just frustrated that we can't get the people the help they need.
Yeah, it's always frustrating when you're managing that list, and there's people that have been on the registry of unmet needs. We're working in some counties on 2007.
Yeah.
So
And that's a long time for somebody to go without the help they need in this situation. So, well, hopefully the state will hear us.
I want to point out that, and Jesse may not have pointed this out because he's thinking strictly about the innovations. Because we have people on that list of unmet needs, the MCO works really hard to find other types of services to give them. It's not that they aren't getting any services, it's just that they're not getting innovation services.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is
Because it is
something
so
I
frustrating for
I
us.
heard
to
at
look
county,
at.
at our county commission advisory board last Tuesday, that they are trying to find, we're trying to find creative solutions to find them services that can fit into the rules. Okay,
Yes.
good. Well, thank you, Jesse.
Sure.
Anybody else have any questions on that? Who's going to do the Stevens stuff? Oh, there you are. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Glad to. This is the first time I've presented to this group, so I'm not entirely sure what all you know about what I'm going to present or what you want to know. But assuming that time is pressed, I will go through it at sort of a high level, but would welcome any questions now or after the meeting.
Well, that'd be great, and then perhaps on a future one, we can get a little more in-depth into some of the stuff that we don't have time for today. Thank
Okay.
you.
Dr. Puckett, before you get into the data, if you could maybe just tell them a little bit about what your team does. I'm not sure that everybody here knows.
Sure, thank you. We now call ourselves the Member Appeals Team, and we generate correspondence whenever there's a denial or appeal. We also manage the peer reviews, which are the clinical reviews. If a care manager can't approve a service, then it goes to a psychologist or a psychiatrist to review and make a medical necessity determination. And then after we've issued denials, then it goes through we manage the appeals as they go through the first level internally and then second level with the state, and occasionally a ways beyond that.
And if I saw the numbers right in here, we're doing pretty well on those appeals and stuff. I mean, we're pretty much on the money on our authorization and stuff.
Well, overall, I think we're pleased with where we are. This is a little bit different than some of the information that being reported here, in that there are usually not specific standards saying your denial or your appeal right ought to be something, a rate ought to be a particular number. Rather, we trend it over time when we watch the trends, and I'll point out some things that are changing and talk about, well, what does that mean? So it's really more where we see a change in what we've been doing in the rate of something that tells us, wow, something's going on, we need to understand what that is.
Okay, thanks. Well, go ahead.
So if you've got the report, I will go through and primarily look at the graphs. I hope you've got the report, the denial and appeals report for the first quarter of calendar year 2017. We do a delay because we track and see what happens not only when the initial request is reviewed and a decision made, but all the way through the appeals process, so we can sort of tell you the outcome of that. On the first page at the bottom, there's a graph of the SARs, or the Service Authorization Requests, that we received. These are by quarters. It's trended over a 3-year period. So you see in the quarter that we're reviewing now, quarter 1 of 2017, we had 10,000 Medicaid requests for authorization, a little over 2,000 for the state, or about 12,000 combined. And that happened to be about a 5% increase from the prior quarter. I don't attribute any particular meaning, there's just fluctuation in that from quarter to
So
quarter.
we'll just keep an eye on that for the year, see if that's a 20% increase or just a bump in the quarter.
Yes, if you look back at the first of this graph, going back into 2014, you can see it was much higher at that time. But what that drop means, we changed some services that previously required authorization to no longer requiring that, some basic outpatient services, and that greatly dropped the number of services.
And those are still funded services.
Yes. On page 2, there are the percentage of denials, Medicaid clinical denials, that were partial approvals. I'll give you a little bit of background. Tracy's been very helpful in helping us be sensitized to that and how it sounds when we present it. Because most of the time when we deny a service, we don't say no to the service altogether. Rather, we say, yes, that's a good service, but you don't need as much of it or for as long. And so on the Medicaid, you see somewhere in the 70% of all the denials that we issue, clinical denials, are actually partial approvals. If you go on to the page 3, then we look at the Medicaid clinical denial rate by quarter and the administrative rate by quarter. The top graph on page 3 is the clinical or medical necessity denial rate. And you'll see that we've been under 3% for something like 9 quarters, over 2 years. But notice that difference from 2.7% to 3% in the last 2 quarters. And that doesn't look like very much on the graph. but that's about a 10% increase in denials, and almost all of those are concentrated, the increase is concentrated with a small number of innovation services that have come about as we've gone into resource allocation, a new model for determining the intensity of services that innovations members receive. The administrative rate, as you see, is much lower. We've been at or under 1% for a very long time, and there's not much variability there. On page 4, you see the graphs about the state-funded services. And you'll notice that the partial approvals for state-funded services are a lot lower, in the 40s or 50%, even down to 29% one quarter, versus in the 70s or up to 80 for Medicaid. But that's because of the difference in the nature of some of those services and what's asked. We get a lot of requests for, in this time period, we were doing prior authorization for ADVIP and other state-funded IDD services. And a lot of these requests were really around eligibility. Does a person meet the state definition of having a developmental disability in order to be able to receive these services? And that's an all or none. So either you're eligible or you're not.
Has the state changed that standard any? So it's the
No,
same? Okay.
It's been unchanged, but there were a lot of services in the last calendar year that we began reviewing, doing prior authorization that we had not, that we relied on the provider to make the decision before. And when we looked at it, we saw well, there's some folks that they're serving that we don't find meet the definition.
And then we have to stick to those formulas because that's where reimbursement comes from.
That's right.
Right.
We have to meet the state definition for having a developmental disability. Now, sometimes it turns out that the person may have it, but they don't have the information to demonstrate it. So many times we say we don't find eligibility, but we recommend you get a psychological evaluation that may give us more information that would be helpful in making that determination.
So we help clients figure out where to go next if we deny them too.
We try,
if we
yeah.
can, yeah.
The bottom of the page is the state-funded clinical denial rate, and you'll see that's a lot lower than it is for Medicaid services. I think there's several reasons for that, one of which is that we have guidelines, authorization guidelines for state-funded services that we can't have for Medicaid because that's an entitlement. But that really guides our providers in knowing what our thinking is for somebody with this level of need. This is pretty clearly what we're likely to authorize, and they're more likely to ask in that range. At the top of page 5, you see the graph of the state-funded administrative denial. Now, an administrative denial doesn't say that that's not the right service for somebody, but rather it says that you didn't submit something with a request that we have to review it. And so it's really saying to the provider, please go back and add this evaluation or give us a signed service order or whatever that we didn't have. But those rates are quite low. We've been at or under 1% for over 2 years on that. Skipping to page 6, you'll see...
Did you mean to skip the appeals? Are you coming back to that? I just had a highlight there. I was wondering
what's in
why
that
it
table is represented in the graph, so you'll
Okay,
just see it
okay,
represented in a different way. We get into now the appeals. For Medicaid services, there are 2 levels of appeal. The first one is handled internally, conducted by VIA. It's called a reconsideration decision. And then if that's not decided in favor of the member, then they can go on appeal to the Office of Administrative Hearings, or OAH. So right now, we're looking at our internal reviews. And notice what happened from the end of 2016 to the first quarter of 2017. We went from 11% of the denials resulting in appeal up to 26%. So not only did the denial rate go up because of those innovation services, but the proportion of people who denied went on to appeal more than doubled, about 2.5 times. So our appeal department has really been slammed on processing all of those appeals.
Steve, could you give us an example of what kind of denial resource allocation would lead to in innovations? And it would seem that with that large a percentage of jump in denials and appeals, were they getting the service prior to that, before, and reduced it or denied that service in their plans, or what happened?
There are two things that are changing. Let's take probably the highest frequency case that we're talking about here, and that would be somebody prior to November of 2016 may have been getting a combination of in-home skill building and personal care services. Those two rolled into a new service, community living and support, that combines those two. But not only did they merge into a new service, but there are new guidelines for determining how much service somebody needs. There's what's called resource allocation that's based on the SIS, the supports intensity scale, and that gives a guideline, not a hard and fast rule, but a guideline for how much service they need. And we find that there were a lot of people in our population who are getting significantly more services than are recommended under this new guideline.
Is that a state guideline?
It's adopted by the state. It was developed by, help me out here, Jesse.
Human Services Resource Institute, HSRI, and the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, AAIDD.
So the SIS is a well documented national and international instrument, and then there is a system that's been implemented to translate scores from that into levels.
So this was a change, not at the state level, but at a national level?
Well, no, it's a change at the state level. It's the sports intensity scale is used for resource allocation. And the last time I looked at any research, it was 17 states. And North Carolina has been implementing this in line with the Cardinal Innovations model for resource allocation. And there are lots of means testings that occur to determine what the different levels should be. There's levels A through G, and each level has a description that allows clinicians to compare the person to the funding that they receive. And then those levels are compared to SIS scores and placed in an algorithm with funding used for people in that category, and different budgets are devised for the individual receiving services.
Depending on what their needs are.
Right.
And what's approved, what's available.
Exactly.
The way it might play out for an individual, maybe that they get what's called a resource allocation letter. It says that based on your SIS and your age and where you live, we find you to be adult, non-residential, level D. And that says that the typical person in level D needs somewhere between 28 and 48 hours a week of paid weekly services. We don't just go hard and fast by that, though. That's a starting point. And then we review the clinical information. We see there may be a special medical need that's not reflected in the SIS, or a recent behavioral change, or maybe this particular family doesn't have much in the way of natural support, so they can't do as much from the family. So we look at those things and we adjust it. But that's our starting point, and we're finding that we believe a lot of people have been getting more services than they really require from this perspective. And that's led to some partial approvals, denials, and as you see...
That big spike in appeals.
Well, and you said this is typical too in other states that this has been administered in, because it's designed to ensure that, well, it's a better guideline to make sure that folks are receiving services comparable to their needs, because historically in innovations or any home and community-based service waiver, it's like a scatter shot. You'll have people that have really high needs that are receiving very little services, and vice versa. And the goal of the resource allocation model is to balance that out so that those with really high needs receive high services, low needs or lower services. And it does take into consideration the natural support system that exists, the community supports available, and it also, one of the challenges for us with the number of families that provide services. But that occurs also in rural settings, so I think that's part of it. And there are some people that the model is showing their budgets should be higher than they are. So it's going both ways. It's just the ones that are not happy are the ones that are seeing it go down.
So it's kind of a data-driven approach to what the needs, the mix between the service and the funding.
And as a clinical reviewer, I feel much more supported. I've really got some objective, research-based guidelines to go. They're not hard and fast, but they give, whereas before it was much more, well, we've got a lot of needs, so how about 45 hours a week, and
Do
there was
you know how
not.
it compares with other MCOs in the state, your denial and appeal?
No, it's one of the things that we've tried to get some comparative data, and we've gotten it in sort of a spotty way, but I don't have any MCO comparative data for this quarter. When I did look at it for a few quarters prior to this, it was hard to see a clear pattern. We had a higher denial rate than some and lower than some others, and we just didn't have enough data to be able to make a very good conclusion.
Jeannie, one thing I can tell you is that we are the only MCO that has taken a resource allocation case to the Office of Administrative Hearings, and we were successful and we were upheld in our decision.
You know, as a disclaimer, the SIS says is not meant to be a resource allocation tool. And so, but the resource, you know, the state is using that, but just for your information.
Yeah, I mean,
The makers of the SIS said it was not to be.
it is just a
for resource
piece
allocation.
of the information.
That's right.
It's just a
That's right.
piece because they take into consideration where the person lives, the natural support system that's in place, the person's age. So it is just a piece. Now, it may be weighted more towards the SIS, but I've been doing something with home and community-based services for almost 22 years, and it
It's the
seems a
best tool
lot.
that there is- that
Yeah,
we have
it
so
seems,
far.
it just seems like it's more balanced in this manner, because historically it was who wrote the best plan. The SNAP was kind of, the
It was too
North Carolina Supports Needs Assessment Profile was just too
Too simple.
subjective and too simple. So it's far from perfect, but it's much better than anything I've used in my experience. And I think things will come about that improve it. I really do. I think, well, I probably said enough. That's something I.
But there have been some lawsuits in other states where they have overturned
Yes.
it and are not allowed to use it.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yeah.
And recently this year, actually, so.
Mhm.
Well, hopefully we'll see, we'll keep an eye on it
Yep.
and see how it affects our policies and stuff. And you want to go on a little bit?
If you've got time, I can keep
Well,
going,
keep
but if you
moving,
need to
sorry.
move on. Okay. Let's go to page 7 then. You saw the number of reconsiderations, or first level appeals greatly spiked. Look at the outcomes. So this is the trended outcomes. So in an appeal, either the decision is upheld, it's overturned, or it can be partially overturned. And you see in this quarter, the outcomes are not really that much different than others. So I think there's no, at this point, there's not anything there that is very outstanding. But it is also dampened by the numbers are bigger there, so those don't, it would take a bigger effect.
Percentage doesn't show as much change, yeah.
On page 8, then you see the number of reconsiderations that were not entirely in the favor of the member that went on to appeal at OAH. And the top one is the percentage of those cases appealed to OAH, and it's a little bit funky because it really peaked in quarter 4 of 2016 and then dropped. I think the better comparison is looking at the bottom, you look at the actual numbers. So in quarter 3, before resource allocation came, we had 5 cases that had been denied with Medicaid that went on to OAH. In quarter 16, partway through is when resource allocation rolled out, that jumped to 13, and then it went to 20 in the first quarter of 2017.
And that's when people's benefits were being changed and they
Yeah,
realized
and
that.
so they're
it had
saying-
a delay there, so.
When it's an OAH hearing, do they come to the client, or does the client have to go to Raleigh?
Well, it can be done many ways, but the great majority of them are done telephonically. So the judge sits in Raleigh, and the rest of us phone in from wherever we are, or the judge phones us. When you file an OAH appeal, the first thing that happens is you're offered mediation through the Mediation Network of North Carolina. And so the table at the top of page 9 shows you of the cases. So there were 5 of 7 cases that were not received. No, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead here onto the hearing. So the mediation, sorry, I didn't have a graph on that. Mediation was accepted in all 20 cases appealed to OAH. And of those cases, 5 resulted in settlement agreements. So we agreed informally on an outcome, and actually, those five were resulted in an overturn of the previous decision. and then 8 resulted in a settlement agreement with partial overturn, and then 7 resulted in impasse, no settlement agreement. So those 7 then went on to OAH hearing. That's the table at the top of page 9. And of those cases, actually 4 withdrew before we went to a full hearing. There was one case that resolved in settlement. Essentially, we have another mediation at the start of the OAH hearing. And in this quarter, there were no cases that were decided by the judge. For state-funded services, there's a somewhat similar secondary level appeal at the state level. We had 32 non-Medicaid or state-funded clinical denials. Of those, 3 or 9% resulted in a first-level appeal that had the outcomes of 1 decision was upheld and 2 were overturned. It's a small number, 3. And we have not had a second-level state-funded appeal in over 2 years now.
That's what I meant to compliment you on. I've read through, I wouldn't remember which part of it.
So, the big change, as we've talked about here, has been the innovations cases as a result of resource allocation. Subjectively, I think the second quarter will start off very similar to this, and then the numbers really dropped off in the summer, and I'm not quite sure what all that's about. But
We'll just keep an eye on this quarter.
We'll be reviewing the data and see what.
Well, and I do think that with the implementation of resource allocation and understanding, that's helping.
And that was one of the points in here, that getting the information out to the providers and having them understand as well, so that everybody's on the same page, I guess.
Part of what happened, especially in that quarter that he's talking about, the state sent out generated these letters to individuals, and I don't think the MCO knew they were going out, providers didn't know they were going out, and everybody was like screaming, like, what does this mean? Because it only included base information, and they thought all their stuff was being cut, and it just created havoc.
That is very true.
Yes.
We've provided a lot of feedback to DHHS about those numbers.
And we'll need to keep doing it, I'm sure, so. Well, good, well, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
And who's going to do the Quality Improvement Committee?
I'm going to be Stephen, the other Stephen.
Okay.
Again, this is a first report to this group from our Quality Improvement Committee. So we will be doing this quarterly moving forward. And what we will do in the future is do an overview of quality improvement activities and quality improvement projects in terms of their status. Today will be an introduction to what the Quality Improvement Committee actually does and what their purpose is. The membership of the Quality Improvement Committee, it's represented by all departments at VIA. We also have provider representation and CFAC representation on the committee. In fact, we've got 2 openings for providers and CFAC members that we're working on. I know Brian Shuping is working with CFAC to look for some more members from their numbers, and we're trying to get 2 providers who can be regularly active, and hopefully we'll address that in the next Provider Advisory Council. The committee is chaired by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Martin, and I am the vice chair for that committee.
I did find you an IDD provider.
Awesome.
As Dawn Kelly said she would do it.
That's great, and she's great. She's on, actually, she sits on Quality Improvement Committee already.
Okay,
Yep.
she told me she didn't think she did.
Yeah, she's on that. We just had it this week and she sat next to me.
Okay.
Yep, she's been coming for a while. Thank you.
You still need 2 more?
Mhm.
Any special 2?
Somebody who'll participate.
Okay.
And this is the committee that was formed after the June meeting.
The Quality Improvement Committee's been in existence ever since we've been a URAC accredited body, even before that.
But why is this the initial quarterly report?
Because this is the first time we've ever reported to this group.
Oh, good, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead then. I thought Stephen had been here before, now I got it, okay.
He's been here before, but he does this big, heavy report.
Yeah.
The Quality Improvement Committee is actually a subcommittee of our Regulatory Compliance Committee, and it's part of a compliance planning. Their job is to provide oversight and leadership for any and all improvement activities, whether it's improvement with providers or improvement internally. We oversee the monitoring and evaluation of key performance areas and indicators, which you hear about ad nauseum in this report that Stephen goes over with you. We also identify and propose the quality improvement projects that are required that you'll see in the next page as we get to that. It also meets a lot of requirements that are regulatory in nature, which is why it's an offshoot of a regulatory compliance committee.
On both the state and federal side.
Yes, and our accrediting body, URAC. I've listed out our ongoing quality improvement activities. I'm not going to go into those, especially because of our time, but those are all things that you should be familiar with because most of them are represented in one way or another in this core performance measure that Stephen Kazuki does go over with you on a regular basis. On the second page, if you look at the QIP section, our quality improvement projects are important to improve the service we offer, improve our provider network, improve our internal operations. But they come with a whole set of requirements, and I've stipulated those requirements there. If you have any specific questions about that, let me know. Each of the three bodies that requires a quality improvement committee has their own requirements. So one thing I want you to know is that a new innovation with this committee is that quality improvement projects will now be approved by our project management steering committee. Because project management steering committee has knowledge of all the projects in our portfolio and the resources that it requires to maintain those, we thought it was important for our quality improvement projects to go through that committee because not all of them are attached to a project and they take resources that are critical to make those improvements. So they now go through our steering committee for approval. This year, we have 4 quality improvement projects that are related to the super measures. If you haven't heard that phrase yet, a super measure is it's a performance measure that's been identified by DMA and DMH DDSAS. They're benchmarks that are being set for us as an NCO. And if we don't meet those benchmarks, there may be financial penalties associated with them. It's important to report that here because as our board members, you need to know that. And you need to know how we're doing. So we are still in conversation with DMA and DMH around these because there's still some confusion about how those should be measured and how those should be benchmarked. But we're moving forward with them so that we can be as prepared as we can.
Who would get the money? The state?
Yes.
We might be better off just giving it to clients if they showed up. They might show.
The last 2 pages of the report show you the 6 quality improvement projects that we are submitting to the state. The state has to accept these. We have no reason to believe they won't. Of these 6, 4 of them are tied to the super measures that I just talked about. The first 2 are really pretty basic. It's how quickly is somebody who is discharged from a mental health facility seen in follow-up? And the second is how quickly is someone who's seen in a substance use facility seen for follow-up? The benchmark is that they have to be seen in 7 days or less. And that has to happen for this first year where there are penalties attached to it 40% of the time. That's true, we have to do that for Medicaid members, and we also have to do it for state-funded members. So it's true across the board, not just for one group or the other.
And this has been a problem we've been dealing with as long as I've been on here. That it's, and we've tried different solutions. I'm not sure their goal is realistic, but you know, we've looked at transportation, we've looked at calling, following up, finding what we can do, scheduling the appointment, and you can only make people do so much.
Yes.
But it is one of our metrics that we're rated on. And
It
it's
is.
frustrating not be able to.
It's amazing.
So hopefully we can keep making progress on this.
Yes, and as you'll notice, we have provided you where we have that information In this chart, I've provided you with our baseline, where we're at right now. So for the mental health follow-up, we're at 37.9%, so we're pretty close to our benchmark. For the substance use follow-up, we're at 26.9% as our average, so we've got more of a ways to go there. The next project is associated with the Transition to Community Living Initiative. As you know, the Transition to Community Living Initiative is an important piece of what we're doing at RIA now, and it's important in our communities and for the folks that we serve. One of our quality improvement projects this year has to be attached to the TCLI. We have 2 of our projects that are related to TCLI. The first is going to be related to the number of housing slots filled per month. The benchmark is 10 for VIA. These are set individually per MCO. Our benchmark is 10. We are averaging, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's last year's benchmark. And right now, in our conversations, we're looking at 7 being our benchmark
That's the state benchmark now,
for this fiscal year.
so we're hitting it then.
Yeah, we are averaging 7 per month. So that would be a better benchmark for us. In terms of achievement, I'm not sure it's a better benchmark for the overall goal of TCLI. I have to say that.
Good for you.
Thanks, Mark. I totally missed that. I appreciate that. The next project is an innovations quality improvement project, and this is related to checking for whether or not innovations members have had a preventive or primary care service in the last 12 months. This is going to be a tough one because we don't have baseline data for this and don't have an easy way to get this information. So each of the super measures is evaluated on a monthly basis, and if fines will be attached, it will be based per monthly performance. For this super measure, we have to demonstrate that 90% of innovations members seen in a month had a primary or preventive care service in the prior 12 months. 90%. So this is the one that we're still having the most conversation with the state around, and so stay tuned. So the benchmark's 90%. Like I said, we don't have a baseline here, but we are diligently working both with our MIS department about how we're going to generate the data, where it's coming from, how we're going to be able to report on it, and we're working in conversation with the state about how we get this to be more reflective of the need for integrated care for our innovations members. The next project is one you've heard of about a lot, but it is more focused this year. It's the Inpatient Rapid Readmission Project. Because this has been such a concern for a period of time, that project kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what we're trying to do in the year coming ahead is narrow the scope of that project and look at specific areas to reduce our rapid readmission. If you don't remember, rapid readmission is when someone is readmitted to an inpatient psychiatric facility within 30 days of a discharge. The national average for rapid readmission is 12.3%. Our average has been 13.2%. So our goal is to be at or below national average. We're going to specifically be looking at our response to folks who are discharged by employing complex care strategies through our acute response care coordination team, and also by working with our providers around assertive engagement of folks immediately after discharge. And last but not least is our final TCLI quality improvement project, and this one is going to be related to the quality of life surveys. This is one of the requirements in the TCLI and is on the regular dashboard. This is really about completion rates of this survey, and the benchmark is 80%. We are averaging 53.4%. So we have quite a ways to go, but we feel like this is an easy correction given focused energy on this and support. We have a full InReach staff for our TCLI team, and that's critical to getting these surveys done.
I'd like to see one of those surveys. Can you send me one? Our CFAC might be interested in looking at these
We can do
surveys.
that, so that you can see what's in them. They're pretty good. They look at, basically, what is the person currently doing for themselves, and what are,
Who put the survey together?
no, I don't know that. Do you know, Mark?
That was designed by the quality assurance folks at DMH.
Did they have any clients with them when they designed it, or did they just design it?
No idea, Ron, do you know?
I do not know. I would suspect
It's
probably not.
it's some pretty basic things, like do you feel safe in your home? Do you have transportation? Can you get to your appointments? Are you receiving services that you feel like you need? So we can get you a copy of that.
I'll make a note about that.
And Tracy, on this TCLI, I know we've used Fiscal Legal Firm for some of the help through that process, and that's one of the possible cuts we may be having to make.
I believe that cut has already been
Already been made, and I'm just wondering if that's gonna affect our TCLI numbers here.
You know, we're hopeful not, but it certainly has the ability to do so. Where they were primarily helpful was in helping us keep people in housing, individuals who have been transitioned and who were experiencing landlord-tenant disputes. They were very instrumental in helping resolve those disputes to avoid eviction.
Right.
And is it your hope that if you do master leasing, you'll be able to have better control over those incidents as they come up?
That would be one option, yes. It's a challenging population.
And then you were saying, I believe at one of the previous meetings, that they're drawn to be in Buncombe or in the Asheville area, so it's harder to find more spots in the more urban area than in the.
The overwhelming request is Asheville.
And I saw
Downtown Asheville.
Henderson and something else after it too. So. Them and half the people in the southeast. Well, good. Anything else on that, or should we move on? Everybody ready to move on? Are you going to do his core measures report too?
Yeah, what I'd like to recommend, since we are at 8 minutes after 4.
That's right.
Is that perhaps if folks have had an opportunity to look at the core measures, you can ask questions, because we also have the regulatory compliance log, and we're at 8 minutes after 4.
Okay.
These were in your packet to look at in advance.
Yes, I did read over this, and I didn't make any highlights on that one, so I could, I did have one question.
Sure, I'll do my best.
On page 12, I guess, the TCLA via overview and MCO comparison. Had these big jumps in 2016. I was probably here, so, I was here. I can't remember what that was caused by.
My page numbers don't match yours, so is it
Page 23 in the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, I thought you said 12, I misheard you.
I've got 12 in my packet, but it's the PowerPoint is page 23.
Okay.
The PowerPoint you're looking at, I think, has been updated. If you actually look at the one in the handout.
The other packet?
Yes, sir. I believe it may have been.
Okay.
Did you make changes to it?
I did not.
Then the computer's incorrect, I'm sorry.
So tell me the heading on the graph. So I make sure I'm looking at it.
TCLI, comma, via overview and MCO comparison.
Thank you. Oh, you want me to look at this running?
Which measure is it? Measure
I'm on
2 or 3?
Page 23. Yes,
So the
it's page 12 in there.
percentage of individuals
I
transition
can't see that far.
within 90 days.
Oh, measure 2.
Measure 2.
Measure 2, that helps me, good. I can look at the big numbers now.
And we were low. I was wondering why some of them were high, and just curious if you knew why those big jumps were there.
You talking about the admissions and readmissions?
You're talking about
TCLI,
November
measure
16,
two.
is that November 16, that 100% jump in there? I remember them talking about that before.
Yeah, I know. So it may not be important. I know we look at these. I'm looking back because in the last 2 or 3 months we're still waiting for data. So look at the previous year to see trends that jumped after the data is corrected.
So the goal would be to transition somebody within 90 days.
Right.
Some people are going to take shorter amounts of time, and some people will take a lot longer time. So it's sort of a rolling number. So if you, and I don't know this to be the specific case, but if you only had one person
Then the percentage would show
November,
high. So this is a number to
and they were-
percentage issue.
Right, and they were, within that 90 days, it would be 100%.
Okay.
Whereas if you had 4 people and 3 of them were within the 90 days, but one of them that took
Yeah.
400 days.
And so
that sort of
sometimes,
throws it off.
and I guess this got taken out because sometimes we got the numbers of people, cases with the percentage. And that's where we can look back and go, oh, it's a small number, then don't worry about the percentages as much. So I think that's what, thanks, that clarifies that for me.
Marvin, do you want to tell the committee what you did before you came to VIA to help them understand how you have such a depth of knowledge about TCLI? I think it would be helpful.
Well, I think I told them last time, but in case you've forgotten, prior to coming here, I worked at the Office of the Secretary, and I was the risk manager for TCLI for the state.
Okay. Well, you'll be very knowledgeable, and we're glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be.
Are there other
Could you
questions?
say that again louder so they can pick it up on the microphone?
You'll be very valuable, and we're glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Any other questions or comments about the core performance measures?
So you want to go on to the regulatory compliance line?
Andrew, while you get that ready, Jesse, they're starting the event if you wanted to step out of the great. When we get done here, we may start the board meeting a few minutes late so that y'all will have time to check out the Narcan drop-in event where you can get your picture taken and be included in the video we are
Please
creating.
do, please do.
Yeah, I did that on Tuesday. I hope.
Oh,
y'all-
you don't have to.
I hope you all will be kind if the picture doesn't come out. Have me take another one. So.
Well, yeah, if you want, you can go get another one and you can choose.
I know. Something about standing in front of a camera doesn't serve me well. I deal with people, but cameras don't work for me. All right, moving right along.
In the interest of time, I can do the same thing, and if you've already reviewed, it hasn't changed since it was put in the board packet, so. Or I can go through it if you would prefer.
No, that's okay. Let me just, I read through and see what, I've got a couple things highlighted. The prison discharges, there was an increase in that I saw. And only 2 attending their appointments. That's gonna be a tough, I mean, I guess, are they not, is this not part of a parole or anything like that, that they need to be following up with appointments, or?
It varies. It depends on which correctional facility they have been discharged from. We just talked about this in Quality Improvement Committee this week, which is why I know about
That's
this.
one of the things I highlighted too, is how are you gonna make somebody who just got out of incarceration show up?
It's hard. So the customer service team has done outreach with the different correctional facilities that will allow outreach. And we talked to them about the information we need. They're required to call us and make an appointment for those folks who are leaving the prison system. It could be a county prison, it could be a federal prison or state's prison. They're required to make those appointments, but they're not required to enforce follow-up. That's on us. So we're trying
And do we do any
to.
counseling as before they leave the facility?
No.
So they've never met anybody, they're just told when they leave, here's an appointment?
Right. The county detention facilities, we have folks in some of them.
Right.
But not all of them. And we have a higher rate of show in the counties where like RHA is in the Buncombe Detention Center. So we have a higher rate of show for them. We have a higher rate of show for folks who are on probation and have to report in.
Okay.
But
Ones that are done.
We're done.
And they're not real keen on coming back into the system if they don't have to, I guess. Okay. And I see that Alpha is still not operational in some of its episode completions. That we're still-
No, but we did meet the numbers the last quarter, so we're looking to see if we'll do that again. They've made adjustments on their own, so.
Okay. And so you're hoping some of those will be problems will be fixed with Alpha?
We are, so we did meet the standard the last quarter, so it's just to see if we can maintain that. So we'll have more information once we have the new report out.
And then I see the TCL is working to develop VIA plans to increase housing in key catchment areas, Buncombe, Henderson, and McDowell. And that's just, we're looking at all options to find a way to house these clients that need housing. And,
We just submitted several other proposals to the state, and we're hoping that they're going to be approved
okay.
shortly.
And I'm
This
just,
is in addition to the previous 3 proposals that we had submitted that I still don't think that we've received an answer on.
I know, I wish they could get back with us sooner.
I know you did just mention the 3 counties, Buckham, Henderson, and Val. Do we have adequate housing in the other counties, or are we just focusing on those 3, or?
Those are the counties that most people, when we're working with them in transition, are requesting to move to. So that's where we're focused, because that's where the biggest request is. We're not doing anything in the other counties. That's just what
I'm just surprised they're requesting to go to McDowell.
And then Maya's overall score for items reviewed is 96.15, that's good.
Yes, it was great. We were very happy with that score. My team oversees that review, and we were really happy with the score. That's a big review.
Well, there's a lot of good stuff going on here at VIA, and hopefully the state will follow our example and start getting some good stuff going too. So, if anybody has any more questions, if not, we'll go on and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn so we can go on and partake in the...
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And we'll have a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank y'all so much, and we'll meet again next month, I guess. So, thank y'all for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I think we're ready to begin. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'll do the roll call. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Beal.
Here.
Richard Bunio.
Here.
Jack Kahn. Ira Dove. Okay. Ira Dove.
Here.
Jeannie Duncan.
Here.
Joyce Edwards.
She was on the phone.
Telephone.
Here. Here.
Dr. Jeff Heck, he's not here. Pam Holcomb.
Here.
Judy Johansson.
Here.
Okay. Thought the voice changed. Okay. Billy Kennedy.
Present.
Michael Lavender. Pat McGinnis.
Here.
Mike Norris.
Here.
Marsh Pittman.
Here.
Steve Smith. And Mandy Stone, and she's actually resigned from the board, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. We have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is public comment. I don't have the list in front of me, but I'm sure Mr. Jerry Rice has signed up to speak.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else? All right, Mr. Rice?
That means I get 20 minutes, is that right?
Go ahead.
I got a handout I'm gonna pass around. Got a kind of a area that I want to talk about today. And I've accumulated a lot of information from different folks, organizations, and even providers and individuals. And these are some thoughts I'd like for y'all to consider. And the reason I wrote it down so you could remember it. If you get more than 3 points, you'll forget it, you know. That's why a preacher keeps his sermons short. Anyway, home and community-based supports is a very important right, but are violated every day. Who notices or who cares? And I've got about 20 bullet points there that brings out some issues related to that. And the thing that I want you to think about as a board is I'd like for you to reference the VIA Health bylaws and the Code of Ethics and consider these concerns that we're listing here as part of those bylaws and ethics. And we put some suggestions on the back, and maybe some, solutions or something to that effect. And I'd like for you to look at those. I don't want to go into these specifics. I'd rather you read them and think about them. And it might be something that your board that evaluates what do you call that board? Mr. Kennedy, you?
The
on-
regulatory and
Yeah.
compliance.
It might be something
committee.
y'all might look at from that perspective, and I appreciate it very much. The last thing I'd like to make a statement on is this thing with Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Mission Hospital. My personal opinion, from what I've evaluated, and I've got a YouTube video, you can go and listen to the arguments. But I think Mission Hospital is big enough, and I don't think using them as an insurance company, I don't think is a valued way to go. They say it's not their insurance company, but they're trying to be exclusive to everything. There's not a need that they ain't covered except behavioral health and integrated health. They're trying to get it all in this community. And I think if we're gonna have competition, we need it somewhere else. So these employees, we want them protected insurance-wise, but I don't think putting your eggs all in the same basket is the way to go. So that's my point of view. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we have review and approval of the agenda and prior meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes and had a chance to look at and review the agenda?
So moved.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. I think Ronnie Field seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, everyone. At this time, conflict of interest disclosure. We call on Tracy Hayes, our general counsel, and CCO.
There have been no new conflicts of interest reported since the last board meeting. The second item that I wanted to address with you all had to do with, there was a request for information from the Department of Health and Human Services. We had some questions about that, so I just want to make sure that everybody understood where that request came from. As part of our Medicaid contract, all members of this board of directors are required to disclose certain personal information that is used by the Division of Medical Assistance in validating that members of this board are not on the OIG exclusion list and meet criteria to serve as board members. So this, of course, included your full name, your date of birth, your social security number, your address. And so I know there were some board members who had concerns about that. If you have any questions about that, you can let me know. But we were not asking for it to be nosy or to pry into your personal affairs, but because this is now written into our contract with DMA, and there's an annual requirement. And then when we have new board members join, we have 30 days to update the state as with that information. Are there any questions about that? We also, and I was in the middle of passing it out when I stopped talking, we have new forms. We have new forms that everyone needs to fill out. You do not need to fill them out right now, but if they could all be filled out and completed by the next board meeting, and we will email these as well. So the first packet with the paper, paper clip are federal forms, the employment eligibility verification, as part of an audit we did of our personnel files, and of course technically we are all considered employees of this board, of the organization. There are forms that you need to fill out. These are apparently new forms that we do not have on file for everybody, and of course new board members will not have filled these out. There's also a new confidentiality agreement. We had a recommendation from URAC, our accrediting body, that we had a different version of the confidentiality agreement depending upon whether you were a board member, a committee member, or an employee. And their recommendation was that we create a consolidated confidentiality agreement that would be applicable to everyone. So we have created that document. If you all will just look at those documents, and if you can sign them today, great. If you want to take them home and give them back to us next month, that would be fine as well. And then also a couple of board members have had questions about expense reimbursement requests. If you have any questions about expense reimbursement, whether it's hotel or mileage, or if you decide to participate in one of the conferences that we offer to board members, please check with Ryan. She will be able to help you get whatever it is that you need. But there is a form that is put out at every board meeting on the table that has the board member expense reimbursement request. So you just need to pick one up at the end of every board meeting and fill that out. So if you missed it at a previous board meeting, that's not a problem, we can still take care of it. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, the next item, there's actually 2 items under the report of the chair, is the nominating committee update and then the swearing in of those board members. We have 2 board members, 2 new board members to recommend tonight. Jim Holland, who is the Assistant County Manager in Buncombe County, and Gary Blevins, the very distinguished Wilkes County Commissioner.
Did you say extinguished?
No, distinguished.
Thank you.
You're
kind words.
Thank you. And, Mandy Stone has stepped down, and Jim Holland has agreed to take her place. And so at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we nominate or accept these 2 as new board members, Jim Holland and Gary Blevins.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Gary, you can't say anything. Okay. Okay, well, not that we're wasting any time, but if Jim and Gary, if you would step forward, and we're going to swear you in as new board members. Stand right here. Real complicated. Swearing in a new board member. I state your name.
Jim Holland, Blevins.
Do solemnly swear that I will support. Repeat after me.
I do solemnly swear that I will support.
solemnly swear that I will support
And maintain the constitutions of the laws of the United States and North Carolina.
maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and of North Carolina,
Not inconsistent therewith.
not inconsistent therewith,
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a board member of Via Health.
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a board member of Via Health.
Welcome to both of you. Thank
We usually have a judge read this to us and we just say,
you.
yes.
People sign those, and then would you take a couple minutes and tell us about yourself?
We just need to sign this form.
Just sign
Okay.
this, please. Or the attorney will react.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go first.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Holland. I'm been with the Department of Social Services and then Buncombe County Health and Human Services now. I'm in my 28th year. I've been in the role of the Assistant County Manager and Health and Human Services Director since July 1 upon Mandy Stone's appointment as County Manager for Buncombe County. Worked very closely with the behavioral health community. I've managed the behavioral health contracts for Buncombe County for many years and worked very closely in hopefully the establishment soon of C3 356 and the final completion of the Neil Dobbins Center move to there, and hopefully the Child Crisis Center where Neil Dobbins currently is. Have a great interest in assuring that the health of the community, both from a physical and behavioral health perspective, are addressed and addressed holistically and addressed in a way that assures access to all of those services regardless of someone's ability to pay for those services or their standing in life. And very honored to be a part of the board, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Gary Blevins. I'm from over Wilkes County. Been serving on the County Commissioners Advisory Board for, well, basically since it was formed or shortly thereafter. And very interested in VIA and the services that they provide in our neck of the woods. I've been chairman of our Regional Council of Government twice, and that covers 7 counties, which are also in the catchment area of VIA, so that they're all very interested in what's going on as well. I've served on the board of the county commissioners with Ronnie Beal for a number of years, and he asked me to be, I guess it was about 3 years ago now, wasn't it? He asked me to co-chair his legislative goals committee, which formulates the entire legislative goals plan and advocacy program for the County Commissioners Association, which is a very strong lobbying group in North Carolina, very, very well respected at the legislature. So that was a great process, and as a result of that and the success we had, I was named the commissioner, I guess you'd call it the commissioner of the year, co-commissioner of the year last year, and that was a tremendous honor. You know how it is when your peers recognize you. It means a lot. So, but I think the staff here and the other commissioners on the advisory board recognize my commitment to being here, to being present, and to being a part of a consensus building process where we try to look past our personal preferences and party and bring a diverse group of people together and create an atmosphere where we can agree on things and move ahead and make decisions that are the best for the most people that we serve. And I'm honored to be here. This was something I was kind of a goal of mine for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm very grateful to be recognized for what I've done and the effort I put into it to be able to be nominated and become a member of the board. And I thank y'all very much and look forward to serving until I go out of office. Thank you, Rick.
Be careful what you wish for.
I wished for the worst.
We're glad you did.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is the gaps analysis. Call on Tommy Duncan, Provider Network Business Process Manager.
Ronnie, you spend a lot of time in the spotlight, but you're in the
You
spotlight.
can see my head, I have my head off the screen.
So good afternoon. For those of you who have not been subject to having to sit in this room and listen to me talk before, I'm Tommy Duncan. I'm the Business Process Manager for Provider Network here at VIA, and I'm also the project lead for the gaps analysis project each year. The gaps analysis is actually the community behavioral health needs, providers, and gaps analysis. It's the last time you'll hear me say that. It's the gaps analysis. A few things, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview because you have, the light reading that you were provided about the gaps analysis. I'm just going to give you a few of the basics. For this year, at the request of a number of groups, the state added the C waiver, the innovations category of services that we report out on. Instead of, there were IDD services in previous gaps analysis, but this was a concerted effort to really track many more of those services. There was a lot more emphasis on member, family, and community stakeholder perception in this year's gaps analysis. And you'll see that I've got 50% threshold there. Along with that meant that we had to take into account the perception of our members, our family members, and our community stakeholders. And that varies from county to county and based on your experience with the system. So what we decided is to use a 50% threshold. If more than 50% of folks who responded to our community needs assessment this year felt that there was a lack of services, we considered that to be a lack of services. The Network Development Plan, which is another report that we're required to submit every year, is now part of the gaps analysis. It is actually submitted to the state for the first time. And this year, DMA and DMH developed the services crosswalks that we use to pull our data. Instead of us saying these are the codes we use for these services, the state told us what codes we were going to pull based on input. Typically, the gaps analysis is due on April 1st every year. This year, it was extended to May 1st and then ultimately to June 1st. And we submitted ours on May 30th. Now, fortunately, because Yvonne is in the room, I got to pick her brain a little bit a few minutes ago. And the gaps analysis is still in the review process, again, partially because of the delayed submission dates. So we do not have our final approval. I am quite happy that they haven't asked me for anything extra, which means maybe we did a halfway decent job this year. For this year, in creating our calculations, we looked at 218,000 Medicaid eligible members. For our non-Medicaid funded members, we looked at 9,595. Each year, we are required to look at our gaps in our system based on access and choice standards. Those access and choice standards are very much based on the service category. If you have a category that is of services that is provided in the community, nobody really cares where the provider is located. That provider can be in a different county. You're looking at, but if a member has to drive to services, there's a very specific set of standards as to how far they need to be required to drive. And it means all individuals must have access to service within 30 minutes or 30 miles from their residences if it is an urban county, and 45 miles or 45 minutes of their residence if it's a rural county. Choice is, for certain services, we're only required to have one provider for that service. In some services, we're required to have a minimum of 2 providers. So this is your map of urban and rural counties. Please notice that in there you have Madison County as an urban county. You have Alexander County as an urban county. And that is because those are considered to be outlying counties. But they're still urban. And what we have discovered over the past couple of years is it doesn't really skew our results a whole lot. We're very fortunate in that. So regardless of how the state categorizes them, it does not really make a huge impact to our gaps. All right. Part of the process is also the exceptions report. And an exceptions report is a third report that we send to the state that says, okay, we don't meet the standards. Here is why. Here is what we're going to do about it. And we have to do that for any service that falls below 100% of the benchmark. So no margin for error. It requires that we identify why and develop a plan of correction. Sometimes we realize that they just cannot be corrected. And we'll talk more about that in a second. And then our exceptions reports are reviewed by both DMA and DMH. So I'm showing you 3 of our gaps that we have here. Outpatient services for Medicaid. 99.67% of all potentially eligible Medicaid members could receive service within the standard guide or the access and choice guidelines. Okay? It's below 100%. I have to submit it as a gap in our system. Multisystemic therapy. Multisystemic therapy is for a very specific age group of children. It is a not a commonly utilized service. And we have one provider, which is Youth Villages. They provide the service to the entire catchment area. It is part of our gaps because we are supposed to have 2 providers. Unfortunately, there isn't enough usage of that service to be able to keep 2 providers afloat for that service. So what we have chosen to report back to the state is we have 1 provider. That is all we can support at this point. And for state-funded service, unfortunately, the continued cuts have negatively impacted our ability to provide some of those state services. And unfortunately, some of the responses on our exception report have simply had to be, we can't fund anymore at this point. All right, just a few highlights I want to show you, and then I will get out of your way. Members served for this year, total 48,369. And that is based on the division across the disabilities is based on the primary diagnosis group for all claims that have come in. Now, we may have 1 member who received substance use services and mental health services. We took everything and put it under their primary diagnosis. Does not mean they didn't receive any other type of service. It just means they're categorized in the primary diagnosis group. Total credential providers this year, we have 3,690. And that includes our LPs, our LIPs, and LP, LIP practitioners and agencies. Each year, we're required to do a community needs assessment. We have chosen to do that over the last 3 years through an electronic survey and in a written survey. People chose to take it that way. This year we had 1,451 total responses. I'm very proud of that. I always want more, but I'm very proud of that. I'm very happy with that number because it gave us a lot of really great information about what people thought the needs of their communities were. And we got 184 more responses this year than we did in our 2016 survey. So, if you have any questions, I know that you have an incredibly tight agenda today. I'm more than happy to answer those anytime. My email address is here. Ryan can give it to you. I know this is your light evening reading, so please enjoy. Is there anything I can answer for you before I leave? Since I know all of you had a chance to read this in your other committee meetings.
That response to the survey is up, but that's something we're still seeing in quality committee, that we're having a hard time getting the responses as high as we want, but we're on the right trend.
I'm proud of it. I welcome any feedback, any suggestions. The area we continue to struggle with is the very far west and rural areas. And I would love to see our participation increase. And I'd like to say that CFAC has done an amazing job. Every year, they're hardcore pushing this.
Good.
It's wonderful. Because I think that is where a lot of our increases have come from.
I have a question. When you outlined IDD, SA, and MH services, a couple of slides back, so as far as primary diagnosis goes, most of the time if there is an SA diagnosis, it is considered primary, but they may not be receiving services for SA. They will be receiving services under another category. Is that computed into those figures?
There.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've spent a lot of time on this at CPAC, and we're very proud of this report and very proud of the work that Tommy's doing. And he has listened, he has heard, and he has done a lot of what we've asked him to do, so we're very pleased with it. I know I am.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, our next item on the agenda is our report from our Chief Executive Officer, Brian Ingram.
Appreciate everybody's participation so far, and I think we've probably wrapped it up now in our Narcan kit making video event, I guess you could say, and that was the second of which we've had this week. Worked out really well with the meeting of the County Commissioner Advisory Board. We got a really good turnout, 15 or so, I'd say, and we did a similar kind of thing with really great coverage by the media. There were 2 stations that covered it, doing the videos, and just to take it one step further, on Thursday, the governor's going to be coming, and we kind of worked out a arrangement, let's just say, to have a similar kind of event, and he's actually going to be signing a proclamation. So, any board members that would like to come, we would love to have you. We have to get this RSVP'd, I think, by tomorrow. It's, I would say, a private, kind of a by invitation event, you know, because we have to work, you know, very closely with the governor's office on this thing and organize it very well. But we certainly would love to have board members and, of course, CFAC representatives. And Nancy, we got you signed up. Judy? Yeah.
Ronnie's got it, we're working on
Yeah,
Ronnie.
unfortunately, he's going to be out of town, but for the rest of you folks, we'd just love to have you here. It's going to be Thursday afternoon from 3 to 4, and we'll do it probably right here in this room. Please, just, if you know you can make it, let Ryan know. So we have to, you know, I mean, seriously, we have to keep a very close track of who and who's represented and all that. We have some, you know, stakeholders from all across the community. So very happy about that. A couple of things to speak about this evening. Legislatively, very unusual. I don't think I've heard of anything since I've been in North Carolina like this. In terms of the budget bill, there was a mistake in a calculation, and you may recall, and we shared this with you, the page in the budget bill which explicitly stated the amount of single stream reductions. Okay? Hopefully this is sounding familiar. It was broken out into 2 years, recurring and non-recurring. And it's kind of a funny story how this came about, because partners had been monitoring the development of the budget and had seen some previous iterations of the budget single stream draft language, and noticed that towards the end, in the version that was actually promulgated, that their amount changed quite a bit. So after, you know, the governor signed and it all became official, they said, you know, we're not sure if ours is really right or not. And lo and behold, they found out that it was calculated incorrectly. There was a math error. So that math error affected everyone else's amounts. So if you have, I think this is a handout in your packet. This is a revised version of what we had issued maybe a month or so ago. Really the only changes in here are in that third paragraph where we talk about the changes in the amount. It's a additional $400,000 cut for us, which of course no one is very happy about. And in fact, I did an executive committee meeting explaining how there was this bill which came out of nowhere, which was a correction to these amounts. that was vetoed by the governor, and I think was overridden today by at least the House, and probably the Senate will do the same thing. So part of what we heard about in Finance Committee, and you'll hear the report, is a correction to our budget in relationship to that. And a little bit of a silver lining on the last page, and then I'll go back and tell you a little bit about our status and where we are with it. And now we're going back to the last 2 years, the budget for the last 2 years. The language there contained a caveat where if the Medicaid budget essentially was over-revenued and there was an excess, that there was the possibility that we could receive a rebate. And that's my term, I'm not sure what else you would really call it. Functionally, it's money that we would receive back from the state to help to minimize that reduction that occurred. And last year it was $20 million was our share of that reduction, which is pretty hefty. So it was a total of $30 million. Our share of that was right about $4 million. So that came back to us, functionally goes into fund balance that we can use to help mitigate against the reductions that we'll be having in the next 2 years. So that is the one thing that is different about this version. Otherwise, I think these are all things that we've talked about. The one on a status report, and Yvonne, I won't put you on the spot, I'll just leap at you after the meeting and find out the status of our in lieu of definition. Essentially, what we've done is ask the state to play a very big role in how we manage these reductions by enabling us to use additional Medicaid services. And here's how simple this is. And let me start off by saying this is not a long-term solution. This is a one-time thing that we can do and provide a little relief. There's nothing about this that has any long-term solutions in it. It's not good for us, it's not good for individuals that don't have Medicaid. It's unsustainable. And I think everybody, if there's one thing you take away from here, please remember that. Essentially what we're trying to do is move as many people who receive state-funded services to Medicaid services. And in some cases, that's not a direct correlation, but that is the best strategy that we can employ to give people, if not the same thing, something like that. The benefit of that, of course, is it both minimizes the effect on the provider, right? Because there's a big effect on providers with this, not having the revenue that they expect, and of course the member. And you know, we have to put the member first in relationship to all of this. We had a pretty good meeting, I think, at the Provider Council, and I guess Jeannie can decide later and how she describes that, whether our communication about that was effective, but really a pretty extensive review of how we would approach some service delivery challenges down to a kind of a granular level on the particular services and how that would work. We have yet to hear back from the state, so we're very, very curious about their position with that, and have certainly implored them to act as swiftly as possible, because the longer we go, the bigger the resultant cut is that we have to manage, right? I mean, as you lose time and you're trying to create savings, you're working against yourself. So that's really the change there. We have also a release from the Secretary's office that is in your packet. That is the latest iteration of the state's approach to Medicaid managed care. And I think you could view this somewhat as a little bit of an implementation plan, if you will, based on the Medicaid reform legislation that is a very kind of broad brush approach to things. This has a little more detail in it in some cases quite a bit more detail. In other cases, really not enough for us to be able to go on. We do have we're fond of these infographics, as I guess you've learned by now, and I think you have a handout there that I won't bother projecting it. You can kind of talk through it a little bit. There's an enormous front-end load that the secretary has created with this. Very significant things that would need to occur, again, consistent with, I'll say, her plan this fall, which would culminate in a request for proposal sometime in the spring. And if you look on, I think it's page 14 and again on page 21, as you're looking at this, I kind of earmark those in mind because it's easier to follow things if you look at those two charts. And really what we did was we tried to take those charts and list out the major milestones here. Otherwise, it's really hard to follow what's going to happen. I should point out, before we go much further, that some of the language has changed. You've heard us talk regularly about our interest in whether we call it a special needs plan, a specialty plan, the whole notion that there is a cadre of individuals that we serve now that make, very extensive use of services. And it probably comes as no surprise that in many cases there are comorbid conditions related to their physical health needs. These are people that, really have very significant healthcare needs. The consistent approach that the state has had has been around integrating the care for individuals across the board, especially important for this group that I'm talking about. So the notion that there would be a specialty plan which would focus directly on the needs of a much smaller population, and you'll see in here the estimates of probably between 85,000 and 100,000 statewide, which is not a lot of people. When you consider our capitation now is made up of a payment for 170,000 Medicaid users, and we had something like, what do we have, 30,000, 40,000 Medicaid users in the report that Tommy just gave you. We're not talking about a big population of folks. What would be different would be the responsibility that the plan administrator would have for the physical health needs of individuals in this group as well. This is I cannot do service to this report or the policy or all the concepts associated with this, but at least to get you thinking about that. Take another couple of minutes looking at this timeline and just offer that I think this is extremely optimistic and would be very difficult to hold to, given that probably two of the biggest wild cards would be the requirement for CMS to approve an amended 1115 waiver. So if you look in there in the fall part, there's a concept paper and then there's an amendment of the waiver that would have to go in, and then CMS would have to approve the waiver in its entirety. And then in the spring, the state would be offering an RFP for both the what are being called now tailored plans. So take specialty plan, special needs plan, call it a tailored plan. Theoretically, we could be responding to seek a contract to be operating a tailored plan next spring, along with all of the commercial plans, statewide plans, and again, theoretically, the PLEs to be competing for contracts for what are being called the standard plan. So to imagine that all of this would be put together in such a fashion that an RFP could be created and people would really know what they were bidding on by next spring seems like a very tall order. If you think this through, then the contracts would be awarded in early 2019. So let's just imagine that all of this did hold true. We submitted a bid we would find out in the beginning of 2019 whether or not we would continue to exist or not. If we did, and we were fortunate enough to get one of those contracts around March, we would have a runway of from between March 2019 and July 2021 to build that plan and become operational. If we did not, we would have the challenge of running an organization that would be eliminated in 2 years, which seems completely irrational to me. I don't know how anybody could be expected to do that, but that is the plan. So, we're going to have to talk a lot more about this, but not tonight. I'll kind of stop there and then see if people have any questions. We can try to address what you might be thinking about or questions you might have here without getting too far into the group out. I will add there's a meeting scheduled, I think within the next couple of weeks, for all of the LME-MCOs to meet with the secretary and hear, I'm sure, more about this. So.
They've changed the regions too, haven't they?
They have not changed the regions. The regions are another big part of this. What they, well, one of the areas that there were a couple of white papers in the spring to early summer, very, not widely dispersed, kind of conversation pieces almost that got shared. It talked about the creation of, again, utilizing the 6 health regions, which there's a lot of problems with those, but, staying consistent with that approach to the 6 health regions, that there would be 3 tailored plans consisting of 2 of the 6 health regions each. So 6 divided by 2, you've got 3 tailored plans. And those are enormous regions in the state. There's nothing at all about that in relationship to LME-MCOs and tailored plans in this iteration. So they really kind of backed away from even some greater clarity about that, which is an enormous factor in how we would approach this and what sorts of relationships we would desire. And so, that's just a huge mystery.
Didn't it say people could bid on parts or all of the service too for that special tailored plan? And
well,
they don't even know, you don't know where you can. It's fairly vague, I thought.
One way of putting it. Well, we do not know what the characteristics of the population would be, other than some broad statements about utilizing enhanced services. And then, of course, especially in the beginning, there would be probably a lot of movement of people into those enhanced or tailored plans. How do you make sure somebody's in the right plan? Of course, in the beginning, that's going to be probably kind of volatile. And even the period of time between the basic plan going live, or standard plan, I'm sorry, I need to get consistent language. The standard plan going live, those plans would actually have responsibility for some of the care that we manage now. So it would be disrupting our capitation and moving some of our capitation to the standard plans. These are enormous challenges and to deal with, both from a kind of implementation, business, and political. Very significant. In addition to having the waiver approved by CMS, there's enormous legislation that would have to be enacted by the General Assembly to allow the HHS to go ahead with this, to even allow us as an LME-MCO to have the capacity to bid on a contract that involved the management of physical health. We don't have the authority to do that now. So all of these things that have to get worked out. I mean, there's enormous questions about governance. You know, we would be competing with insurance companies as a government entity. I mean, please, I've worked in local government in some way, shape, or manner for probably 30 or more years. I get it, you know, and I run a nonprofit, but I can't tell you that we could really be competitive in the way we may need to go out and compete against fill in the blank. It's just not a level playing field. People understand all those features, but again, you're talking about, you know, very significant changes in the law and in things that people may or may not understand and typically have very strong beliefs around. So, for those reasons, I suggest that this is a very aggressive and difficult timeline to hold to. But it's nice to see policy coming out. Well, at least no one's crying, they're just silent.
I thought the glossary and appendix was the best part of it.
That's always good too. So I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, we need to have a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A1 in order to prevent disclosure of competitive health care information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C, 126.1, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, or 4, to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to go in closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I wasn't here and I didn't.
Is there a motion from someone that was here that to approve those minutes?
So approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is our report for the Finance Committee and Acting Chief Financial Officer and birthday girl, Jennifer Day. Review.
Great. So in your package, you'll have all of the financial reports. The first one is labeled Document 1 on the lower right-hand corner. This is the ratio that shows our current ratio. Current ratio measures your ability to make payments for things that are coming due in the near-term future. So it looks at current assets versus current liabilities off the balance sheet. We're required to keep a ratio of at least 1-to-1, and we are currently at 3.0 for Medicaid and at 2.7 for total current ratio, looking at the company as a whole. So we're more than exceeding the requirements. And I do want to say that these reports are based off of the unaudited financials, so they are still preliminary. Things could change once the audit's complete. The second document is the Medicaid defensive interval. This is a measure of how many days cash we have on hand. So it looks at how many days could you last if you got no additional funds before you ran out of cash. The state's requirement is for the Medicaid book of business to have at least 30 days cash on hand. And we are currently at just over 90 days in cash. So our average cash expenditure for our month is about $26 million. And while we're meeting this ratio, I'll refer back to this when we get to some other statements. You can see the trend line towards the last couple of months have kind of gone downward. Some of this is the impact of some of the spending we have. But with Medicaid being separated, this doesn't show what's happening to the organization as a whole, because most of the spending is happening on non-Medicaid side. But as far as meeting a standard ratio, we are more than fine on that. The third document is the medical loss ratio. Again, another graph that shows you trend lines. This is how much we're spending on services compared to the capitation we receive. So it looks at Medicaid service dollars compared to the total amount that we're paid. And you can see that that trend line is going upwards since February. February was artificially low Because February is only 28 days, so there's less actual expenses in the month than a month that has 30 or 31. So you automatically get a little perk for the month of February. This has been increasing over a period of time. It is something that we're watching. As of June 30th, we were at just under 90%. So we're at 89.6%. Any questions on these? So those are our three ratios that are mandated to be reviewed by the state.
So the average is the year average, that's on that medical loss ratio.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The next statement is document 4. It's the consolidated income statement. This shows where we ended up for the year. We break out Medicaid versus non-Medicaid so that you can see information. But as far as the budget, it's just presented in total. There's some additional detail that you'll be able to compare things a little bit more in other statements that we'll go through. You can see on the revenue, the biggest number in the variance column, so it's the next to last column on the far right. There's a negative amount of $35.3 million. That's because from a government accounting perspective, you have to budget use of fund balance, but you never actually show the use of fund balance coming in as revenue. So if you think of it for a income statement of a non-government entity, the $35 million is what we anticipated to lose the current year. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom corner, the last number on the bottom, we lost $19.6 million. So we're really comparing that to the 35. We actually spent $15.7 million less than what we had budgeted. A lot of that has to do with community reinvestment moving slower. It's turned out to be a good thing given what passed in the General Assembly. So that is reflected in the income statement. The expenditures, we were under budget by $21.4 million. The biggest number of that is the contracted services. It has a variance of $16.6 million. Again, that has a lot to do with community reinvestment. There were contracts that were anticipated to be spent that didn't get spent, and so a lot of the dollars show up there. There are some other costs associated with other personnel services and professional fees. Those are things like attorney's fees, legal fees, and just general professional service contracts. Again, a lot of that, some of that money was related to community reinvestment as well. Current obligations is the other largest number on there. It's about $1 million variance. That is coming from costs that came in less than budget related to printing, advertising, recruitment, and training in total. So those were the biggest drivers of where we had money budgeted that we didn't spend in entirety. Are there any questions about
Is
that?
the non-medical actual, that number,
Yeah, so you can see the non-Medicaid, this is the impact, the 22.6 million, the negative. That's the impact of us paying out single stream without getting any funding in, and the intergovernment, actually the intergovernmental transfer should be on the Medicaid side. So that's what's driving that big negative number, because we paid single stream without revenue.
On the contracted services, are those contracts, are they going to be carried over into 18, or are they?
No, our contracts all end as of June 30th, and so contracts are redone as of July 1. So with the shifts and the change in funding streams and the continued cuts from the General Assembly, those contracts were reevaluated, and so some will not move forward. Actually, most will not move forward.
so the question is on the non-Medicaid, the 22 million, Jennifer, is that an actual number? I mean,
Yes.
is that a real amount?
That is a real loss.
So that's where most of our losses are going to occur at. That's where we're absorbing the cuts, that is in non-Medicaid.
Yeah, we're making a slight amount of money on Medicaid side.
Right.
And that money is put back into fund balance, and that's the money that's being used to cover single stream and non-Medicaid admin not being paid for by the city.
Right. So I mean, another way of saying this is we have that supplantation to fill, right? We have the intergovernmental transfer, which is almost like, I almost think of it like a tax that they've added to us, it's a new thing. The other is we get nothing for the administration of all those state funds, so that's at least $6 million there. I mean, if you want to make a short list, and then the what's not reimbursed as other parts of the Medicaid administration, I mean, that's your short list. And that's that competition, again, for fund balance. It's, we have to just change everything to absorb all of that first. And after you do that, there isn't anything more to go on. And if you want to look at the trend, it goes down. So we've gotten really conservative. And that's why this whole single stream thing, I mean, it is a road to nowhere. I mean, it can't continue.
Well, it can when we run out of money.
So everybody ran out of money.
That's right.
Any other questions? So the next document is document 5. This shows the revenue that we've received in slightly different breakout detail. It shows Medicaid, state and federal, how much we get in admin. All the numbers are relatively balanced except for the other and local. The other and local is where we budget for fund balance, and that's what's causing the gap between that. That's the $35 million that we had budgeted to take out of fund balance to spend down. So we'll never actually see that gap go away because fund balance is only a budget item. The appropriation of fund balance is only in the budget. There's never an actual amount. It's one of the fun things about government accounting. The next document is document 6. It shows the Medicaid services budget. So if you look at document 6 and document 7, they are the same information, just whether you like it in the numbers with the table or whether you like the graphs better. So you can see that relatively, most of the variances, which is the next to last right-hand column on document 6, they're relatively small, and you can see that also in the graphs. The one with the biggest difference is outpatient, which is $3.4 million compared to the total of what we had budgeted. When we set up the budget, we didn't anticipate spending 100% of the service dollars that we get in. And so that dollar amount that was not going to be spent was put into outpatient as a placeholder. So the fact that we have extra money left over out of outpatient doesn't mean necessarily that the outpatient services were too low. It has to do with that's where we held the money within the budget process. So most of the changes, all the Medicaid services came down to, we made a little bit over $5.4 million off of Medicaid services compared to the money we received. And again, that kind of rolls back into fund balance to be used for other things. So again, document 7, same information, just in a graph.
Yeah, the one thing to add here too, and I didn't make it that clear, and I used some of the planning, that $4 million rebate, we really have to think of that as over 2 years. I mean, we can't just throw it at this thing we have this year, because we don't know if we'll ever get any again. And even if we did, it's not gonna be that much. So again, it's like we have to really back off.
So the next is document 8, which is the pie chart. This shows where we spend our money. So again, looking at Medicaid services based on the type of service. This really doesn't fluctuate much through the year. More than half of what we spend is on innovations in ICFMR. The rest is all split out amongst the other categories. So again, no significant change in that. That stays relatively the same. Document 9 is the comparative balance sheet. It shows May versus June, and June would of course be the year-end figures. We had a slight decrease in cash, which is the first column, and I'm talking about the difference column on the far right, $438,000. That's not significant. We'll see that it's been much more significant over the year. Medicaid risk reserve, we get 2% of our capitation. It automatically goes into the risk reserve. It also offsets into fund balance. Accounts receivable is up by $3.2 million. That is the net effect of the $4 million rebate that Brian referenced. We have not received that cash as of June 30th, and so that amount is sitting as a receivable, and that's what drove those expenses up. Prepaids, they go up and down throughout the year. Things get written off as the year goes on. Assets in progress is the other large number, that's $709,000. That are for fixed assets that have been purchased, and they will end up being classified into the other categories before being finalized. In the liabilities section, the biggest number that increased is $7.4 million additional in accounts payable. Because it's year end and we usually close out each month relatively quickly, for year end, the books are held open till August 4th so that we make sure that we capture all of the invoices that come in throughout the month of June into August, and all of those get booked into accounts payable. So this happens every year. The accounts payable goes up significantly. Deferred revenue is another item where we have a large variance of $994,000. That is where we received money ahead of time for the ADAC allocation. We received funding up front for May and June. It's just releasing deferred revenue. So deferred revenue is when you receive money, but you haven't earned it yet. And so as of the end of the year, we've earned that money and it gets released. If you look down into the next section, I'm going to talk about the last two items. In the fund balance, where you can see the negative $20.6 million and the 2.3. This is where you see us paying out for the single stream fund replacement. That shows you how much money we spent out for single stream. And the risk reserve match contribution is that IGT, the intergovernmental transfer payment related to paying back the state for what we got for the state match risk reserve. And then on the flip side, if you go to the subtotal of the second page, you can see the amount that we had restricted for community reinvestment was $21.5 million. We actually spent about 11.7, so that's the difference of, again, closing out what we've spent through the year. Leaving everything in balance, total fund balance is down $2.6 million from May into June. Any questions on the balance sheet? So the last regular document is document 10. This is the cash flow statement. I want to talk about the last three numbers on the bottom right-hand corner of the document. You can see the net decrease in cash over the year has been $25 million. That reflects the paying down of non-Medicaid without getting the funding. And I mentioned on the defensive interval that our average monthly cost for Medicaid is $26 million, so we spent down almost 30 days of cash over the past year. And again, this is the area where we really have to watch to make sure that things are not going any faster than necessary. So we are down to $70.3 million as of the end of the year in cash. So that continues to decrease. And that is the end of the standard financial documents.
Is there a motion to approve the financial reports?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Unanimous? Okay. Two budget revisions.
So the first one you should have says budget revision number 5 for fiscal year 2016-17. And the amounts that you can see within the revision are in the middle column. We had a change in an allocation under federal UCR funds, that's $228,000. If you flip to the second side of the page, you can see the reduction of the amount that we had appropriated for fund balance. This is the amount that's being classified as a rebate, for lack of better terms. It has to do with the money that we received back because Medicaid expenditures were not as high as they had spent. So we got $4 million back out of what had been cut from single stream funding. So this budget amendment reflects that we will receive those funds coming back in, and because it's related to fiscal year 17, we have to amend the budget for 17 to make sure that that reflects. The third page also shows a classification difference from personnel to fixed charges, which has to do with shifting money again. $800,000 has to do with some services that were purchased. But because admin was broken out, we need to get board approval for moving it from one category to the other. And this puts us in line for where we ended up at the end of the year.
So we have two budget amendments, we have budget.
Do you want me to go over the other one too?
But-
So the second budget is the budget revision two, or do you need to take a vote on the first one? You have to vote first. Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion on the first budget revision?
I move we accept the first budget revision.
Second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Unanimous, okay.
So the next budget revision is the one that is labeled Budget Revision 2, which is for the current fiscal year 17-18. And what this is we received the rebate in fiscal year 17, so we have to actually change the budget in 17, and we also have to change the budget in 18 in order to spend it. So we are showing that $4 million will go ahead towards services. So you can see that we are increasing the amount that we would be appropriating from fund balance for services as the same amount as what we received last year. So it's a little confusing, switching it back and forth. And then on the state and federal line, the $1,444,000, that is for allocation letters that have come in after we did the original budget. So again, that's money that we've received. The other number that's on here is the appropriation for administration of $60,000. That has to do with the legal retainer fee that we have. I'm not calling that the right thing. The deductible, not the deductible. I called it something else.
Retention.
Thank you. I'll get the right word. So again, these changes are there, and then it's the offsetting the expense category. So it would increase the amount that we spend in state and federal services by almost $5.5 million and $60,000 for admin.
I move we accept budget revision number 2.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor of budget revision number 2 in fiscal year 17-18, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is regulatory compliance and quality committee report. Billy Kennedy.
Now, we had a good meeting. We moved through it pretty quickly, so we got a couple things we'll touch on next time, but we had report from the Chief Compliance Officer, that's Tracy. Our quarterly reports with Jesse Smathers and Special Populations, the Clinical Director. It was really good. Stephen Puckett is our new, he's pretty recent, is he?
His title changed, but.
Okay, his title
Dr.
changed.
Puckett has been with us for quite some time.
But he's the clinical support director and did a great service authorization denial and appeals report to us. The Quality Improvement Committee, is working on improving things along. Things are going well. We've got some, small issues, but they're corrective plans in action for all of them. And then we went pretty quick through the core measures set, monthly monitoring report, and the regulatory compliance log. We had a good meeting and feel pretty good about the state of Via. I wish the state was doing as well as us. And that's my report on the regulatory compliance and quality committee agenda. Anything you want to add to that?
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Consumer and Family Advisory Committee report. Pat McInnes.
Thank you. I'll just take local CFAC meetings. Sylva on the 8th, Lenore on the 14th, Boone on the 15th. The Asheville meeting got rescheduled from the 21st to the 29th due to anticipated travel complications due to the solar eclipse. Representatives from DHHS, Consumer Engagement and Empowerment Team attended to facilitate each group's self-evaluation of activities to fulfill our CFAC statutory requirements. We also completed a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, or the SWOT exercise. Other items on the agenda included committee report outs, an update on the CFAC person-centered plan preparation guide project that's in the works, an update on Via Health and the state's Medicaid redesign proposal. Our annual CFAC retreat is scheduled for October the 27th and 28th at the Montreat Conference Center. And the steering committee will discuss the agenda at our next meeting on September the 11th. Thank you.
Shoot, I'll stop one thing, Mr. Chairman. Pat, because of her involvement and dedication, she's also been appointed by Governor Cooper to the state board. So we're very proud of Pat.
It's the Independent Living Council.
Congratulations.
It's a very important appointment.
I'm on state CPAC, but this is
Not
something.
many people from this area has an appointment like that as received, so we're very proud of that.
And please tell him next week when he comes that I'll thank him and that I'm in this leadership program that his chief policy advisor helped me get into, so I'll be at NC State when he's here.
Our next item is the Provider Advisory Council report. Jeannie Duncan.
Well, our advisory council has been working real hard this year. It's amazing to me that a year has gone by. Does it seem like I've been coming here a year? It doesn't, does it? But we revised, revamped the entire council. We probably had a good 6 months of the council working with the specialty, the subcommittee groups, specialty groups, each having their own goals that were developed out of meetings with IDA representation and what their goals were. Brian mentioned the VIA staff, including Brian, comes to our meetings regularly, and we have our subcommittees in the morning, and then the whole committee meets in the afternoon, and he's always so good to come and give us updates, and the other staff come as we request and as they have information to present to us, and we always appreciate that. We have our retreat planned for next month. I have asked for a meeting ahead of time with Christina and whoever she chooses that needs to be there, but probably Donald and Jesse and I don't know who else she'll have there, but to talk about what we're doing well and what she'd like to see us do better. And then we have taken what some of the QIP projects were that I had last year and have tried to work on those in our subcommittees, bringing providers. And different providers have been brought along at different rates. The mental health providers have been meeting as a group for a couple of years because of comprehensive. So they're kind of a little further along than the IDD providers were. So we've been doing a lot of education in those IDD subcommittees. But we will take the QIP projects that we presented that are now going to be in the VIA contracts and work on those with providers in these subcommittees to assure that providers are also implementing or having QI projects that relate to those QI projects to assure that VIA meets theirs and don't have to have money with contracts as a result. And then I thought also the conversation we had earlier with Patty here about the innovations in primary care. I think the IDD providers would be a wonderful source for that, even as base data. As I was thinking, if you shared a list of the individuals with providers, even in a spreadsheet format, we could get that last visit back, because I'll bet that there's some pretty high percentage of individuals in innovation who have seen a primary care physician in the last 12 months. I would think that would be a pretty high rate. So anyway, that's kind of what we're doing. We're excited. It seems like I know my term of office is 2 years, and I've got one more, so, so I'm halfway through. I don't have to sit here a year, my lifetime like you guys do. This has been a great experience for me, though, and I really do appreciate you allowing me to attend these, and it helps me go back and make our agency better, hopefully.
Well, it was a nice recovery from your previous statements
About him.
Don't want to get out of here. Nicely done. Thank you.
But I want to just chime in, because that's one of the things I left out of the quality and quality committee, that they're working with the providers to clarify not just the rules and specifications, but what different programs we can move different clients into to change the funding formula and stuff. And so they're working with the providers to clarify that too. I left that out. So.
All right, County Commissioner Advisory Board report.
There I go again. It was a good meeting. I think it's always good to keep the county commissioners involved, since they used to be very heavily involved. But they're bearing the front end cost of the state cuts, and they're seeing it on the front line. So I think Brian did a good job of presenting what's going on with the state and where we're trying to forecast and react to what's going on at the state. So I thought we had a good interactive meeting. The county manager seemed to ask more questions than some of the county commissioners, but I thought it was a good meeting and we had a pretty good outcome. And I just, we'll do, the next one will be Tuesday after Thanksgiving, so we don't have to cancel that one this year. And that's a quarterly meeting, and I think that's really important to keep the county commissioners involved with our, what's going on with the VIA, since even though it's, not directly, it does indirectly affect them in the jails, the hospitals, DSS, everything involved. So it's, I'm glad to be part of that, and I think it went well.
Thank you.
You have some other business? I did, and I apologize for not mentioning this earlier. It's just kind of been part of a few things we've been working on. If you watched your television or read the newspaper in the last a month or more, you would understand there's an enormous problem between Blue Cross Blue Shield and Mission. And of course, we have Blue Cross Blue Shield as our insurance carrier and are very mission dependent. So this is created, and of course, we're not alone in this. But we are one of the, of course, the county, I'm sure you guys are by far the biggest.
City of Asheville, Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yeah. You are, yeah. We're on in the top tier of organizations for which this is an enormous problem. And there is no perfect solution. I think no matter what we decide to do, there will be downside consequences. So I, said to Tracy the other night, I very concerned about doing the right thing. I mean, it's made difficult because there just isn't we're between a rock and a hard place. So.
We have met with Mission on a regular basis and lobbyists from Blue Cross. And here's the problem. There's 75% of everybody in our catchment area is on either Medicaid, Medicare, or no pay. The other 25%, 88% of them have Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So that's one side of the story, Mission side of the story. Then you go with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And of course, it's a percentage difference of pay, but the fact is they are more in our area of Medicaid, Medicare patients, and no pay. We have one of the highest. We know, Jennifer can tell you in our budget, the no pay is huge. So there is an argument there, but I think it's they're just all getting their shoes wet, in my opinion, and I think it'll be like the TV channel where they said we're going to disconnect our TV channel on October the 4th. Please write your. I think it's going to get. It appears that there might be some headway in that, but you don't know. When Blue Cross and Blue Shield, they're the main dog. There ain't no doubt about that. So it affects a lot of folks in our catchment area.
Yeah. But it's amazing to me the amount of money that they have to be spending on these commercials. Is why aren't they at the table with that money rather than putting it on TV?
Well, that's because their CEO makes them there.
I know.
10 or 12 under that.
Well, I know what billing I do for a couple of people that I have, and I've been billing for them since 2000. They don't get paid any more right now than they did when I started billing for them in 2000. Janet gets the same amount for PT as she did then. So they can say whatever they want to. I see what comes in, and there has been no increase in what this provider makes today than she did when I started billing for her.
Blue Cross had a bad quarter last quarter. They just made $312 million.
Yeah, it's a virtual monopoly, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference
Well, you've
between.
got two, both of them have a
Yeah.
monopoly.
What will you do, Brian, if they do end their contract? Will you look at another?
Well, we
insurance?
have to, listen, everybody has their own inside story about what's going to happen. So I'm not going to go there. we are planning on them not having an agreement. I don't believe they will have an agreement by first part of October, so you may have to figure out what to do about that. We're very dependent upon Mission. It would be the potential for there to be just enormous financial hardship on employees. This is all about employees. This isn't anything about the company and how much this is all about employees out of pocket. So they would be faced with, again, we're enormously dependent on Mission as a health system which includes specialty care. So when you start to spread that umbrella all the way out there, it's a lot of doctors that our people go to. So what happens? You want to go to that same physician. We're not talking about going into the hospital. If it's just that, you can make an argument, well, you're just going to have to go to another hospital. That's not the major issue here. It's the physicians. So, the individual would be paying out of network, and it's called balance billing, right? I finally got it right. There's negotiated payments that are less because of the existing contract. So it's like a double hit.
It's more than double.
Well,
because of the balance bill.
yeah. I mean, you're out of network, so you don't have the insurance coverage, and the actual cost of the procedure costs more that the patient is going to have to pay for. So how bad is that?
Well, it's
That's bad. So, how can we not find another insurance company? I mean, and it's not like it's going to be just a perfect trade out for everything. So what we're doing is analyzing the networks that the other companies have. And, I mean, the other side of this is, I will tell you this, Aetna in particular looks at this as a chance to really do some damage to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And they're being very aggressive at attracting business. So, can there be a little bit of an upside there? Well, maybe. And as it gets closer and closer, all of this is going to really heat up. I think, we'll probably, we have our quotes from Aetna and United that have the most comparable networks to what we need. And I'm going to go pick Mike's brain here as soon as we get done with this part of things. The broker's coming over tomorrow face to face, just sit in the room with us, and our goal was to have all the information we needed to make a decision by tomorrow, and then probably early next week we'll probably have to decide.
Well, I knew the city would do the same thing, because Virginia comes home every day stressed. She has 2 Blue Cross and Blue Shield policies, through work and through her family, and, it's crazy.
Can you say single payer?
So that's what I got. Okay. Any other business? Don't forget to get your confidentiality agreements. Make sure you sign those, return those to Tracy. You could tonight, or if not, I'm sure the mail over for the next meeting.
Are these, we need to do this every year, so that's, we have to do that confidentiality and everything for it.
What I'll try to do is do it every year.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
That's impressive.
That's-